What's your dream? What's your goal? What's your motivation? What's important to you? What's your passion? What can you do to change the world? This is What's Involved. Conversations with thought leaders and change makers from around the world. Hear stories of hope and inspiration to help motivate people like you to live your life, find your passion, and live your dream. Together, we can all bring positive change to our world. Now, here's your host, David Watts.
And once again, it is What's Involved. Now, we always talk about how great my guests are because I find you only the very best guests. You also know that I am a rabid lover of South Africa and South Africans. Despite our challenges, I still believe, and I think we need to believe. And that's why I love talking to South Africans that have achieved, and sometimes achieved despite all the odds. One such person is my special guest at this time. Who am I talking about? He is Jeff Van Rooyen, the author of Unshackled My Journey from the Township to the Boardroom. Hello, Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you so much, David. I look forward to our conversation this morning.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm very excited to be chatting to you. I got the book and it's brilliant. It's just so interesting and so well read. Parts of it, some people may not even be able to relate to if they are of the younger generation and they were born up, listen to me, they were born and brought up, is what I was trying to say, after 1994. But your story starts a little bit before then. So give me a bit of a background on Jeff Van Rooyen.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction as well, David. So, yeah, I was born in 1950 in Alexander Township, and I'm 73 years old now. And so I was born to mixed parents. My mother was classified colored, and my father was classified African. And then sadly, they separated when I was very young. And I was raised by my maternal family, hence the name Van Rooyen. Okay. And then because of that classification as colored, being the maternal side of my family, I was then raised as such and, went to colored schools and lived in colored areas and so forth. So that briefly is the background, David.
Now, Jeff, just in terms of that, I mean, you were born, as you say, in Alex. Did you spend a fair amount of time there as a youngster?
Yeah, not really, because I think I started at the primary school there, and by the way, that primary school was exclusively reserved for colored people as well, until I was about 9 years old. And then at the age of 9, that is when the apartheid government decided that they really wanted to start, implementing Group Areas Act on a strict basis. They didn't like townships like Alexandra because it was like a melting pot. And they decided they would separate the races. So my father and his family moved to Meadowlands in Soweto, and my mother and our family then moved to Nuclear, which was also then classified as a colored area, And sure. In fact, at the time when we moved into Nuclear, it was occupied mainly by African people, and so the African people were now forced to move also to Soweto, and the colored people, like ourselves, were then forced to move into their houses. So that happened at age 9, right? So yeah, and I mean, so today and all those years, my home language has always been Afrikaans. And because apartheid has been so successful in keeping, the races apart, I mean, I never ever I think I left Alexandria when I was too young, never ever got an opportunity to really interact with people of other races. And so today I only speak two languages, which is English and Afrikaans.
Yeah, I'm often at a loss for words because, I was born a couple of years after you. I was born in 1967, but ended up having to do my 2 years national service. A large part of that was spent in the townships, and that at that stage, apartheid was so pervasive and it had been so well done that, it's not an excuse, but I literally had no idea about any of this. Okay. I was like, okay, you have to go to the army because it's the law, and we're fighting against, as they used to say in those days, die swart gevaar. And I'm like, okay, yeah. I don't know what that means, but all right. And then, ending up in the townships and suddenly having my eyes opened and going, what the heck is going on? Because I hadn't been brought up like that. My dad worked with a multinational company, so we often interacted with people from all the different race groups. My mom was in the dancing world, and they were the first, one of the very first sports that became multiracial. So I was kind of used to seeing people around and people of different colors. And I just thought, in the evenings, all the black people went home. That's why we didn't see any of them around. I didn't know that this was this big thing. And it was shocking at the age of 18. And I'm talking about it as coming from what a lot of people would consider a fairly privileged background, even though we were not by any stretch of the imagination well off, but purely by virtue of our skin color, we were better off than a lot of people. Right. So I think that context is incredibly important, and particularly so with regards to the book, because whilst things have changed, a lot of things have remained the same, and just being able to interact with other people, it's a basic human right, and we kind of had no idea how to do it, not a clue. I think we still battle with that. I think there's still a lot of fear, but maybe that's a discussion for another time, because right now we're talking about you and about your book. So
thank you.
You went on, Jeff, to sort of do well in schools, and you studied, et cetera, et cetera. Mm. When did the idea come about that you wanted to become a CA?
Yeah, well, I think for me, I must just say, because I grew up poor, right, raised by my grandmother and my mother, and there was poverty all around me. I realized when I was 12 years old that the only way that I could break the cycle of poverty was through education, because I got a lot of positive reinforcement from my teachers. I was doing very well academically, and then so that was the only way that I could see. And I always tell people that from the very young age of 12, I pursued education as if the devil was chasing me, And so after I matriculated in 1967, by the way, that's the year when you were born, hey? I matriculated.
Wow.
So David, you have to treat me with a lot of respect, because I matriculated when you were born.
Okay, no, exactly. In my culture, I would either have to now call you sir or one of the two.
Yeah. So good will do, You can say that's my culture too, having been classified colored, So when I matriculated, clearly, the idea was just for me, and I was the first in my family, as you can imagine, as well, to matriculate. And then I decided, well, now it's time for me to go to university. I wasn't quite sure what I should do. I was very good at accounting, but I was good at mathematics and so on. And then I thought maybe I should pursue a career. I should become a medical doctor, because those were the role models, in the community. And being born and bred in Johannesburg, obviously I applied to the local universities, but none of them would accept me, because they said, look, they were reserved primarily for white people. And then they said I must go to the University of the Western Cape. And to cut a long story short, that just killed, this whole idea of being a medical doctor. So my next option was to do accounting, because I was good at accounting as well. And I did that through, correspondence with the University of South Africa. And I just have to tell you the story that, when I graduated with my undergraduate degree, my BCom degree in 1976, through UNISA, I was looking forward to going to graduation. It's hard work studying accounting, by correspondence. Very excited about the idea that I now have an opportunity to graduate. We had this lovely, lovely campus in Pretoria. I was looking forward to doing it. And then the graduation brochure arrived, and to my shock, I discovered that the university expected me to go to the Western Cape to go and graduate along with the other colored folk, because they had graduation ceremonies for the different race groups. I was so shocked by that, dismayed, disappointed, that I decided not to go for graduation, And then 2 years later, I got my honors degree. And then I was able to go to the graduation. I had to swallow my pride because they had integrated the graduation ceremonies for whites, coloreds, and Indians, right? And so our African brothers and sisters were still graduating separately. But because I wanted to have the experience of graduating, that I decided, to go to that graduation ceremony. And so I knew very, very little about the accounting profession. And I just learned through having conversations with my Indian fellow students, because it was quite a common career for them to pursue, I got to know about it because I was good at accounting. I was doing well academically. That's why then I decided, okay, let me try this chartered accountancy. Didn't know anything about it. There were no black chartered accountants at the time in the country, either black or colored. And then I said, well, look, I don't know, let me give this a try. And it wasn't, unusual for me to make a decision like that. I mean, the fact that there were no colored CAs or black CAs at the time, it wasn't sort of problematic for me because I was always just pushing boundaries, so just one of those things that I just did, like from a very young age.
Yeah, no, listen, I think, and this is part of what gets me about your particular story and why I think it should be sort of compulsory reading for just about everybody, is that, but for one or two things, and education being one of them, your life could have turned out way differently. It seems that you took the academic route rather than getting politicized and caught up in the political turmoil of the time. So I think that's a fascinating story. I just have to digress for a second because when you say that you came from a colored family, I'm from. I don't know how you'd classify us. We didn't have a lot of money, okay? We weren't exactly poor, but we weren't exactly middle class. We were kind of maybe from the wrong side of the railway tracks. But in my family as well, if you wanted to be successful in life, you had to be either a doctor, an accountant, or a lawyer. And that was what my folks pushed for. So you can imagine their horror when I said I wanted to be a radio presenter. But again, that's a story for another day. But they were also very old-fashioned, and they were hoping that I would be the first in our family to actually get a degree and graduate. So sadly, they were disappointed. I'm not sure if anybody in the rest of the family has managed yet, but so far it looks like the Wattses are non-degreed people. Anyway, listen, I want to talk about some more of the book and about you wanting to apply for your articles and then wanting to start your own practice. We'll do that when we come back. This is What's Involved. My special guest is Jeff Van Rooyen, author of Unshackled, My Journey from the Township to the Boardroom. We'll be back with Jeff in just a bit.
This is What's Involved. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. More next.
And we're back. What's Involved? That is. My guest is Jeff Van Rooyen. Great book. You guys need to get this. We'll tell you how a bit later on. The book is called Unshackled, My Journey from the Township to the Boardroom. And as I said, Jeff Van Rooyen is my guest, who shall now be known as Jeff to me. Jeff,
I'm very happy for you, David, to call me Jeff. Most of my friends these days call me Bra Jeff. You can either call me Jeff or Bra Jeff, okay?
I think Bra Jeff maybe would work for me because I still get shocked when people call me and I'm at the tender age of 55 now. So, but Jeff, you've now graduated, okay? You've got to do articles, and then once you've completed your articles, then you could look at a practice of your own. Yes. In these days, it should be easy and simple to our minds to do something like that. Tell us your story, though.
Yeah, so in my particular case, because there were no black chartered accountants or African, black chartered accountants I was aware of. So I applied at random, just selected some firms at random, said to them, listen, my name is Van Rooyen. I'm matriculated at CJ Bertha High. My first language is Afrikaans, but I'm black and I'm seeking articles. And I always joke and say that they invited me for the interview because they must have been very curious, about this person, who seems to have such a strong sort of Afrikaans background and yet says that he's black. And I say that they must have said, this we've got to see. And that's why they invited me. And that's why they invited me to the interview. But I was very determined, because I knew that without articles, I wouldn't be able to qualify as a chartered accountant as a requirement. And I said to myself on the way there that, they're going to have to give me this articles or they'll have to call the security to drag me out of there, And then, fortunately, cut the long story short, they decided to grant me articles, but they managed my expectations very well. They said to me, listen, Jeff, you're the first person of color that we're going to be employing in this position. We know our clients are not ready to have a person of color on the audit teams. So we're going to keep you inside of the office. You're going to do work in the office. You will have no client contact until such time that we think that the climate has changed. Cut the long story short, fortunately, to their minds, the climate changed 2 years later. And in my third year, I was then transferred. I was transferred to audit, completed my articles, qualified as a chartered accountant. And most chartered accountants working for major accounting firms aspire to be partners, in the firm. And that was certainly my aspiration. When my time came for consideration, then I was told that the firm was not ready. Now, this is not external, not the clients. They were telling me that some of the partners in the firm were not ready to have a person of color as a partner.
Sure.
And I was told that if I wanted to become a partner, I should take a transfer out of the country, to the Transkei office, which was considered to be another country, And David, once again, I was very shocked, dismayed, appalled. And then I decided, well, I can't sit around and wait for people to deal with their own racial prejudice and their own bigotry, because you don't know how long you're going to be sitting around, how long you would be sitting around. If you tell me that I'm not ready for a promotion and you're able to tell me what my weaknesses are, at least you're giving me something to work on, But if it's racism and bigotry, I've got nothing to work on. And that's when I decided I'm going to set up my own practice, which of course created. Then I was confronted by a completely different set of problems, but I'll pause there for a moment.
Okay. No, I'm just, I'm smiling. It's like, in those days it was, look, you got the qualifications. You're a wonderful human being. If you could just maybe wash the brown off a bit. These days it sounds ludicrous to us, but this was a fact. Then you wanted to go and start your own practice, and I'm sure there were raised eyebrows. It's like, how are you going to make money catering to the colored, Indian, and black community, because there are no real businesses there? So that must have been the first challenge. But then where you wanted to situate your office also became a challenge.
Absolutely, David. And just to share a bit of an anecdote on washing the brown off, as you say. When I was in primary school, I often joked that I was washed twice because I was raised by my grandmother, and she also grew up in a very, very race-conscious society, her generation, and she was very concerned about my complexion. I was the darkest, of all of her grandchildren. So when I was in primary school, I would wash myself. Then she would have a look at me, and she wouldn't be too happy, and she would wash me again in the hope that it would wash some of the brown off. So that's really a true story, and so then I decided, well, if I'm not going to get, I can't sit around and wait for these guys, so I'm going to set up my own practice. Now, then I made this discovery that I'd worked in Johannesburg now as an article clerk for a number of years, right? I had qualified, I had a couple of years post-qualifying experience working in Johannesburg. And then I just discovered, hey, you can't actually set up a practice. I was told by landlords when I tried to apply for office premises. And they said, no, Jeff, you have to go to the Department of Community Development. That is what it was called. And apply for a permit under the Group Areas Act, right? I couldn't understand it because I said, but guys, I've been working in town for many years. Why do I need to apply for Group Areas Act? And then they said, look, it's fine for you under the Group Areas Act to be employed in the Central Business District, but you cannot be an employer in the Central Business District. And then I had to apply for a permit. And thankfully, after about 6 months of toing and froing with the Department of Community Development, I managed to secure that permit. And as you say, my client base was primarily, Black businesses, Black NGOs, trade unions, those were my client base. That was my client base. I had one interesting client, though, because of, again, my name and the language and all of those things, I was approached by a group of women. They call themselves, it's a sort of a society of women, but they call themselves die Bond van Moeders, right? So
Sure.
a group of Afrikaner women, right? Bond van Moeders. So they called me up one day and they said, and I just went by the name because I was practicing as Van Rooyen and Company, you see. And so they must have selected this at random and then called me up and asked if they could come and see me because they were looking for auditors. And there's these two young ladies, well, not young ladies, I mean, they were all 60 plus, came to see me. And you can imagine their experience having grown up in South Africa as well. They then came to see me at my office. And, most people, when they have an idea of what they expect to see, lose their composure, and it would take them 2 or 3 minutes to recover, But these two ladies, honestly, David, I'm telling you, when they saw me, right, they did not even flinch, right? Bond van Moeders, right? Came, had a chat with me. I said, I'd be so happy to be your auditors. And I audited, their books, prepared their financial statements for about a decade, to be honest. And at the end of every financial year, when I take the financial statements to them, I will have tea and cake. And that to me is a lovely, lovely story. I regret that I haven't dealt with it in the book. It's a lovely, lovely story because it does give one hope, that it is possible for us in this country, to transcend race and build a kind of a different society. So I had my first taste of it really, when I was in practice with this group of people. But other than that, most of my clients, as you say, were Black. And it was hard. It was difficult because, in terms of affordability and so on. But I was quite happy to do it because I always felt that I should use my knowledge and my experience to try and make a difference within my sphere of influence, and it just gave me an opportunity to make that difference.
And I think that is one of the things that I picked up in the book, and now chatting to you as well, Jeff, is this concept of hope. Despite everything that has gone on, despite challenges that were thrown at you, you've always had the sense of hope that this is not how it should be, and I can help make things better in whatever way, shape, or form that I can.
Yeah, David, it's a very, very good point that you raised because, having been a victim, if you like, of racism and bigotry, right, simply on the basis, it's clearly on the basis, it's something superficial. It's about the color of one's skin, right? I feel so strongly today, David, that if you want to judge people, right, that you must judge people on the basis. First of all, I say don't judge because biblically we're not supposed to judge because we don't walk in the shoes of those people, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're human and we, frail and all of that, we do tend to judge. But I say if you judge people on the basis of the values and the principles and not on the basis of the color of the skin or the gender or the sexuality and all of those. And I believe that, to be honest with you, David, I believe that with all of my heart. And I also am an idealist in a way. I'm an optimist in a way because I have a very multicultural family. My one daughter is married to an African. The other one is married to a white South African. My grandchildren look like the Rainbow Nation. And so, I really genuinely believe that it is possible. It is possible that we can build a different, society. That was one of the big takeaways for me from my experience. The other big takeaway from my experience is that I never allowed other people to define my boundaries for me. There's so many people who said to me, Jeff, when I said I want to be, it even started with matric. When I said, look, I want to matriculate, people felt that I was setting the bar too high. Then I said, look, I want to be a graduate. I want to get a degree. No, you're setting the bar too high. I want to be a chartered accountant. No, you're setting the bar too high. So throughout my life, I've been pushing boundaries and absolutely refuse to allow other people to set boundaries for me, But even as I speak to you today, I mean, as you know, there's so much happening in the country. There's so much negativity in the country. People are complaining all the time. But my message to young people is to say, listen, if you want to make something of your life, right? Know where your talent lies. In my case, it happened to be education. With someone else like yourself, it happens you're a radio personality. So I say, know where your talent lies and nurture their talent. And don't put yourself in a dark space where you see the world as a hostile place and you see the world as a difficult place. Because if you do that, you're not going to recognize the opportunity even when it's right in front of you. So I say just always remain positive, have an open mind, and be single-minded about, pursuing your career aspirations, and that regardless of where we are in the country, I mean, we're not in a good space generally in the country, but that's what you need to do, and try and find a way within your own space to make a difference so that we can build this new society that I believe it's possible for us to build.
Wonderful stuff, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is What's Involved. My special guest is Jeff Van Rooyen, author of Unshackled, My Journey from the Township to the Boardroom. When we come back, we'll be finding out how Jeff landed up in a boardroom. All that and more on What's Involved. Back in a bit.
Hey, like what you're hearing? Share the podcast with your family and friends and spread the word. This is What's Involved.
And we're back. What's Involved it is. My guest is Jeff Van Rooyen. Unshackled, my journey from the township to the boardroom. So, Jeff, your practice was going, let's fast forward a bit. How did you transition and end up in boardrooms and end up on the various boards that you're on? Because you sit on the boards of a couple of really impressive companies at the moment.
Yeah, well, I've been on the board of MTN Group for 12 years. Where I served on quite a number of the board subcommittees, and because of my financial background, certainly at the audit committees of MTN. I also served on the board of Exaro Resources, which is a mining company, for 12 years. And in my last 2 years, I was the chairman of the board. And as I'm speaking to you, I'm still on the board of Pick n Pay, where I chaired the audit committee until about a year ago. So I transitioned, from that position, but I'm still on the board and I will be retiring this year. I'm very happy to just give you a sense of how this happened. But so for me, the big advantage about being a chartered accountant is that it just opens up so many opportunities for you. You can stay in the accounting profession, which was my initial aim, if you like. I wanted to become a partner and remain in the profession, or you can move out of the profession into commerce and industry. Many, many chartered accountants are acting as chief financial officers of company. You can go into academia. There's all sorts of things that you could do. And then for me, an opportunity opened up for me to become the chief executive of the Financial Services Board, which is a regulatory body, right? I didn't know much about financial regulation, but I had a lot of financial knowledge and expertise as a chartered accountant. Applied for that position, got the position, stayed there for a couple of years, and then introduced very, very significant legislation. But one of the things that I'm very proud of during my tenure at the Financial Services Board, I'm the person who's responsible for piloting what we call the FACE legislation, through Parliament. And that is legislation that professionalized the financial services industry, because now if you want to practice as a financial advisor, you need to get registered, you need to meet certain criteria, etc. So, it was during my tenure that law was kind of put in place. So that's my proud achievement there. But I've always, because I've spent most of my life in the private sector, I was never going to be working in an institution like that, which is a semi-government institution, forever. So I decided to get back into the private sector, and then I started getting these offers to join boards. I had probably in the first couple of years more than like a dozen offers to serve on boards, but you have limited capacity. And I decided upfront that I would restrict myself to 3 boards. And I selected those because I thought that they were very strategic and interesting and exciting, and I would be able to make a contribution. I just want to single out, if I may, how I became a director of Pick and Pay. Can I do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we'd love to hear that.
Okay. So I was shortlisted. I was a shortlisted candidate for a board position at Pick and Pay, and in particular, they were looking for someone to chair the audit committee. Now, even at that stage, Pick and Pay listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, multi-billion rand, business, which is controlled by the Ackerman family. They themselves are, extraordinarily wealthy family. Although Raymond also started off poor. He wasn't a wealthy person. I mean, he started off poor. And if anyone's interested in Raymond's story, they should read his memoir, which is called Hearing Grasshoppers Jump, And so when I was invited to then meet with Raymond, first thing I did was read his memoir. And when I read it, I saw that there were very many similarities around how he started out, what his struggles were, how we were able to overcome the struggles. And then I went, for the interview. I had the interview not only with Raymond, but with his entire family. It was Raymond, his wife, and his children, and his son-in-law, and all of those people sitting around the boardroom having the conversation. And at the end of it, Raymond offered me the job. And for me, again, that is what gives me hope, because that we can build this new society, because a lot of people were telling me, as I was preparing to go through that process, a lot of people were telling me that there was no way that I would succeed. And one of the reasons that they gave was they said, Jeff, because you are not Jewish. They say the Ackerman family, they're a Jewish family, and there is just no way that they would appoint someone like you to chair their audit committee, which deals with the finance, the heart of the business. There's no way. But then at the end of that conversation I had with the family, I was offered the job. And as I said, I've been there for 16 years. And the only reason why I'm stepping down this year is that, I am 73 years old now, and I need to play more golf. I need to find time, for leisure activities, So, yeah, and I've enjoyed my stint, really, my tenure as the director of all of these companies. But because, I'm also entrepreneurial, I set up my own investment company some 17 years ago. And so I'm running that business right now. I mean, we've been able to grow it. We've got a good portfolio of businesses. And then 2 years ago, I brought my eldest daughter into the business as well, just as part of my own succession planning. So, I've really been blessed. But again, it's a case of, I come back to what I said earlier on, that I think if you've got a good set of values and principles, you're prepared to work hard, you're positive, you're open-minded, I think you can make a success of your life. And I think in some ways, I'm and I say it, quite humbly and quite modestly, but in some ways, if you consider where I come from, Alexander Township, and where I've landed, I just hope that other people, young people in particular, will draw some inspiration from it, David.
Yeah, no, listen, I think everybody can draw inspiration from the story and just the way that you talk about your life. And what comes through for me is that there's no recriminations. You don't go, oh, this and that, and think of all the excuses why. You seem to focus all the time on the positive. Jeff, when we come back, though, we're going to wrap up and people can find out where to get the book. And also, I'd like to touch on the golf story, because you have a passion not just for golf, but for caddies as well. So we'll talk about that when we come back. This is What's Involved. I'm speaking to Jeff Van Rooyen, author of Unshackled, his journey from the Township to the Boardroom. Back in a bit.
You're listening to What's Involved with David Watts. Have you been to our website? Check it out, www.what'sinvolved.com. And while you're there, click on the coffee mug icon and buy David a cup of coffee. He'll love it.
And we're back. What's Involved it is. My guest is Jeff Van Rooyen. Unshackled is the book, my journey from the Township to the Boardroom. And just before the break, Jeff, I said we're going to talk about golf and we're going to talk about caddies. Now, I can't really talk about golf because I play a rather unique game, which is called Moer en Soek. So golf is really not my forte. But the caddy side of it, I understand. And let me just tell you a little bit about one of my experiences. Is when I used to live in Nelspruit, we had an eventing company there, and I got to meet a gentleman by the name of Robert Gumede, who actually started out as a caddy at the Nelspruit golf course. And Robert has gone on to do some amazing things in his life. A couple of controversies, but I think he's a great guy. And caddies are something. And just talking to him, man, they get the short end of the stick a lot of the time. So talk to me about golf. Why golf? And then talk to me a bit about the caddies.
No, thank you very much, David. So, I became a member of the Johannesburg Country Club, almost 30 years ago, right? But I never, ever played golf. I mean, I used the club for lifestyle purposes, right? So the caddies were always a blind spot to me because I wasn't a golfer, right? Until about 10 years ago when I decided, because everyone be talking about golf and all of that, I thought, well, let me give it a chance, started playing golf some 10 years ago. And then I become aware of the golf caddies, started chatting to them about, tell me something about your life, where you're from, how much money are you making, how do you support your family and so on. And I was quite surprised, David, that here is the reality, right? So when we were under British colonial rule more than 100 years ago, that's the first time that caddies were employed on golf courses. But you can understand that with the Brits, during colonial rule, they didn't see Black people in general as full human beings, right? I mean, to their minds, I mean, we were probably, no better than slaves, right? So they just employed these guys on the basis that we'll allow you to come onto the golf course, we'll allow you to carry a golf bag, and you can negotiate your fee, which was very paltry, with the golf players. So that was the system, and they had absolutely no other benefits. And during colonial rule, that was understandable. Then came apartheid, and nothing changed during apartheid for reasons that we all understand, right? So that system continued. Then came 1994, this new democratic government. And David, you will remember when 1994 came, the slogan of the ruling party at the time was a better life for all, right? So
they haven't done so well, let's be honest.
Yeah, so it was a better life for all. So when I started playing golf and talking to caddies, David, I discovered that this system that was put in place by the Brits, the colonialists, endured through apartheid, endured even well into the democratic era. And even as I'm speaking to you today, that is still the system. So these guys, they're regarded as self-employed. You must take care of yourself. The club don't take care of them. And really, they are struggling. Nothing has changed for these guys since 1994, okay? Absolutely nothing has changed. They must take care of themselves and so on. And then I started because, I could relate to them, right? I could relate because that's how I started my life as well, right? I could relate. And I said, no, bugger this, I have to become an advocate for change. And so, and also, I've learned over the years that, you need to organize yourself. You've got to be an advocate for change. So I established an organization called Finding the Fairway Foundation. That's what it's called. And then I got some like-minded people together. And now through the Finding the Fairway Foundation, we are now advocating for change. We would like to see golf caddies being employed by golf clubs, and they must have all the benefits that, that employees have, in companies. So I'm an advocate. It hasn't made me very popular, but you know what? In any other industry, maybe you could say, yeah, well, I can understand it. But in the golf industry, I mean, there is so much money in golf. Walk into any golf club and look at all the luxury cars that are parked there. Look at the money we spend on golf clubs and all of that. So I honestly, David, believe it's disgraceful, that we find ourselves in a situation like this today. Through my advocacy, I've also been working with government. But, there's such paralysis in government, I'm afraid to say. I don't know where the interests are, but I've not had the kind of support that I kind of anticipated. But apart from all of those things, while I'm busy with this advocacy to try and get them better working conditions, I've just recently signed an agreement with the University of South Africa, and we're going to provide training to caddies across the country, to help them be better at the jobs. And the training that we'll be providing will also help them migrate, from being a golf caddy to perhaps other occupations. So I'm very excited about this agreement that we have with UNISA. And I must tell you, it's not rocket science what I'm doing, but it's never been done in the entire history of golf in this country. I've had conversations with the governing bodies in golf, and they all look at me like I'm coming from another planet, to be honest with you. But I'm patient. I know it takes time. I mean, in my book, one of the things it's an African idiom that I refer to in the book, where it says that if you want to move mountains tomorrow, you must start by lifting stones today. And then, in regard to the golf caddies, that's what I'm doing. I'm just lifting stones on a day-to-day basis. But I'm hopeful that ultimately justice will prevail for them.
Yeah, Jeff, listen, I'm with you 100%, because I know how those poor guys struggle and very often how they get treated as well. I did smile when you said that the foundation was called Finding the Fairways, because that's something I never managed to do. Yeah, in fact,
I still struggle from time to time, and I've been a golf course for the past decade.
I was working for one of the big commercial radio stations a good number of years ago, and got told that there was this celebrity golf day that I had to attend, and I protested and said I never played golf in my life. And I have shared the story before, but they said eventually my advice was go to a driving range, hit a bunch of balls, and whatever you do, when you get to the golf course, please just get a caddy. And I'll edit the whole story down because it was very, very embarrassing. But after hitting the balls, I ended up with blistered hands, got my caddy, and ended up doing this celebrity golf day at the Royal Johannesburg Golf Club, where apparently if you start smashing big divots out of their tee boxes, they get quite grumpy. Eventually I retired after the 9th hole due to an injury to my pride. And on that specific day, my caddy thanked me for taking him to parts of the Royal Johannesburg Golf Club he'd never seen before. So that was my little golfing story. It was very, very, very embarrassing. But anyway, Jeff, as we wrap up now, because once again I'm running out of time, let's just chat about the book. Where would people be able to get your book? And as always, I know that generally these books are available in digital format. I would still recommend getting your hands on a hard copy. There's something about having a book like this in hard copy. So where do we get them?
Yeah, so David, the book is available on Amazon, and so one can get the Kindle version of it. I mean, if one's keen to read Kindle, I read both Kindle and hard copies, but hard copies are available through all the the well-known bookstores in the country, like Exclusive Books and Bargain Books and places like that. And it's clearly also available on Take-A-Lot.
Okay, good. So all of the major platforms, you can get it in digital version if you'd like. Maybe if you're listening to the podcast of this and you're not based in South Africa, get the book. Okay, because these are some universal truths that Jeff talks about in here, and it is an incredible book. Jeff, before I let you go, there's one last thing I'd like to ask you, because you mentioned, you're 73, you need to retire to play more golf, but after a book like this, what's next for Jeff Van Rooyen?
Yeah, it's really a very good question, David. I mean, I deal with quite a number of themes in the book. And it's only 160 pages. And the feedback that I've been getting from people who've read the book, and thankfully, I mean, we've sold a lot of books so far. I'm very grateful. Feedback that I'm getting is that some people are saying, encouraging me to take some of the themes, especially around business, and to perhaps just write another book. So that's something that I'm seriously thinking about, about how to start a business, how to raise the capital, and how to just make those kind of business decisions to once you're in the business, how do you grow your business and all of those things. So I can draw on my experience from having been a director of major listed companies. And so perhaps that might be my next project.
I would encourage that, and I'd like to put my name down to do the first interview.
Thank you very much, David. And thank you so much for having me and for having this lovely chat. It's been fun.
Wonderful stuff. Well, that wraps it up for this edition of What's Involved. Go out and get the book, Jeff Van Rooyen, Unshackled, My Journey from the Township to the Boardroom. As I said, it wraps it up. To each and every one of you, look after yourselves, take care, and thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to What's Involved. We hope this episode inspires you to find your passion and live your dream. Don't forget to rate, review, and share the podcast. And to see what's happening, what's going on, and what's coming, follow What's Involved on Facebook and Twitter @What's Involved. Thanks again for listening.